There is only one thing more terrifying than a man who controls an empire. A father who realizes his power cannot save the child he loves most. Matteo De Luca had spent 20 years building a criminal empire that stretched from New York to Miami. Judges owed him favors. Politicians feared his name. Business executives competed for his approval. If Matteo wanted a building emptied, it happened within minutes. If he wanted a problem to disappear, it usually did. But on a cold Thursday evening in Manhattan, none of that power mattered. Because the tiny body lying motionless in the back of his armored SUV belonged to his 6-year-old daughter, Gianna. "Daddy!" Her voice was barely audible. Matteo leaned closer, his hand trembling as he brushed a strand of chestnut hair away from her forehead. "I'm here, sweetheart." Gianna tried to smile. Instead, her tiny chest tightened. Her breathing became shallow. Then, it stopped. For one horrifying second, the world froze. The convoy came to an abrupt halt in the middle of Fifth Avenue. Black SUVs screeched to a stop behind them. Bodyguards poured into the street, forming a protective circle around the vehicles while terrified pedestrians scattered in every direction. "Move," one of them shouted into his radio. "Clear the intersection." Inside the SUV, Matteo pulled his daughter into his arms. "Gianna!" No response. Her lips were turning blue. His heartbeat pounded so violently it drowned out the chaos outside. For years, enemies had whispered that Matteo De Luca feared nothing. They were wrong. This was fear. Not bullets. Not betrayal. Not prison. Losing her. "She's not breathing," one of the bodyguards yelled. The convoy's emergency medical vehicle screeched forward. A combat-trained paramedic climbed inside, immediately beginning chest compressions while another attached a pediatric oxygen mask. Nothing. The little girl remained frighteningly still. "Get us to St. Catherine's Medical Center." The order exploded from Matteo's throat. The convoy surged through the city under a wall of flashing lights. Traffic parted. Police escorts appeared. Every traffic signal turned green before they arrived. Within 8 minutes, the emergency entrance of New York's most prestigious children's hospital had transformed into something resembling a military checkpoint. Armed security officers. Hospital administrators. Trauma surgeons. Pediatric specialists. Everyone was waiting. Not because of the patient. Because of her father. As the SUV doors flew open, Matteo stepped out carrying Gianna against his chest. For the first time in decades, the feared Mafia boss looked less like a king. And more like a desperate father begging fate for one more chance. Doctors rushed her through the emergency doors. The hallway erupted into organized chaos. Machines beeped. Nurses shouted medication dosages. A crash cart rolled past. Matteo stood rooted outside the resuscitation room, unable to move. Behind the glass, more than a dozen specialists fought to restart the heartbeat of the only person who had ever made him believe redemption was possible. Then the heart monitor released a long, piercing tone. Every person in the room stopped. Except one. Near the back of the emergency unit, a 27-year-old pediatric ICU nurse named Olivia Bennett looked away from the monitor. And toward something no one else had noticed. And in that single moment, while the city's best doctors focused on saving Gianna's life, Olivia realized they might be trying to solve the wrong problem. The piercing tone from the heart monitor echoed through the resuscitation room. For one dreadful second, nobody moved. Then the room exploded back into motion. "Resume compressions. Epinephrine ready. Charge to 20 joules." The pediatric code team moved with practiced precision. Hands compressed Gianna's tiny chest. A respiratory therapist squeezed oxygen into her fragile lungs. Another physician prepared the defibrillator. Outside the glass doors, Matteo De Luca stood perfectly still. His tailored black suit, worth thousands of dollars, was stained with his daughter's tears. His fists were clenched so tightly that fresh blood trickled from where his fingernails had dug into his palms. Enzo Moretti, his longtime bodyguard, stepped closer. "Boss!" Matteo never looked at him. "Nobody leaves this hospital." His voice was calm. Too calm. Every guard immediately understood what that meant. Within minutes, armed men dressed in tailored dark suits quietly took positions throughout St. Catherine's Medical Center. Every entrance. Every elevator. Every stairwell. No patient was disturbed. No doctor was threatened. But everyone knew something had changed. The hospital no longer belonged to its board of directors. It belonged to Matteo De Luca. Inside the trauma room, Dr. Nathan Mercer finally stepped back. "Pulse." A nurse immediately checked. "I have a pulse." Relief swept across the room. Gianna's heart had started beating again. But she still hadn't regained consciousness. Dr. Mercer removed his gloves and exhaled heavily. "Transfer her to the pediatric intensive care unit." As the team wheeled Gianna toward the ICU, Olivia Bennett quietly walked beside the bed. Unlike the others, she wasn't watching the monitors. She was watching Gianna. Every movement. Every breath. Every tiny reaction. Something bothered her. She couldn't explain why. Not yet. After 15 years of working in pediatric critical care, she had learned to trust one thing above all else. Instinct. Instinct had saved children when textbooks failed. It had caught infections before lab reports. It had noticed internal bleeding before scans. And right now, her instincts were screaming. The official diagnosis arrived less than an hour later. A rare congenital cardiac rhythm disorder. Complicated. Unpredictable. Difficult to treat. The specialists gathered around the conference table all agreed. Medication would stabilize her. Observation would continue. Further testing would begin in the morning. Everyone nodded. Everyone except Olivia. She quietly reviewed Gianna's admission chart. Perfect developmental history. No previous cardiac episodes. No family history. No warning signs. Nothing. Children with congenital rhythm disorders almost always left clues. Gianna hadn't left any. That bothered her. A lot. She walked into Gianna's room. The little girl looked impossibly small beneath the crisp white blankets. Machines surrounded her. Soft beeping filled the quiet room. Matteo sat beside the bed, gently holding her tiny hand. His terrifying reputation had disappeared. He wasn't watching security cameras. He wasn't giving orders. He wasn't thinking about enemies. He was simply watching his daughter breathe. Olivia had seen that look before. Not on mafia bosses. On fathers. There was no difference. She approached quietly. "Mr. De Luca." Matteo looked up. His eyes were red from exhaustion. "Will she wake up?" Olivia refused to lie. "I don't know." Most people would have offered false hope. She didn't. "But I promise you." She looked directly into his eyes. "I won't stop looking for answers." Something about the way she said it caught Matteo's attention. She wasn't trying to comfort him. She believed it. Hours passed. Specialists came and went. Neurologists. Cardiologists. Pulmonologists. Every expert reached the same conclusion. The diagnosis fit. Mostly. Yet Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that everyone was looking in the wrong direction. Near midnight, she returned to the nurse's station and began reviewing every medication Gianna had received since arriving. Dosages. Times. Responses. Everything. A senior nurse walked past. "You're still here." Olivia nodded without looking up. Something doesn't fit. The older nurse smiled sympathetically. Sometimes children don't read the textbooks. Olivia smiled politely. But after the woman walked away, she whispered to herself, "No. They don't. But bodies don't lie." She opened another chart. Then another. Then another. She began comparing Gianna's vital signs minute by minute. Heart rate. Blood pressure. Oxygen saturation. Medication times. One column after another. Nearly 2 hours later. Her pencil stopped moving. She stared at the page. Then looked back at the monitor logs. Again. Then once more. A cold sensation crawled slowly up her spine. Every major drop in Gianna's oxygen levels happened. Not before treatment. Not during procedures. But exactly 15 to 20 minutes after receiving one specific intravenous medication. Olivia frowned. That's impossible. She checked the chart again. Same result. She pulled up the electronic records. Again. The pattern matched perfectly. Her heartbeat quickened. If she was right, the medication wasn't helping Gianna. It was making her worse. But that couldn't be. The drug had been approved. Verified. Double-checked. Administered under the supervision of one of the country's most respected pediatric specialists. Unless... Olivia slowly leaned back in her chair. The hospital around her had grown almost silent. Most of the lights had been dimmed for the night. Somewhere down the hallway, a machine beeped steadily. She looked once more at Gianna's chart. Then toward the ICU room where the little girl lay unconscious. For the first time that night, Olivia wasn't wondering what disease Gianna had. She was wondering whether Gianna had a disease at all. And if she didn't, then someone inside St. Catherine's Medical Center was causing a 6-year-old girl to die. Olivia didn't tell anyone what she had found. Not yet. A pattern wasn't evidence. It was only the beginning. She closed Gianna's electronic chart and quietly walked toward the pediatric intensive care unit pharmacy. The hallway was almost empty. Outside every entrance stood Matteo De Luca's bodyguards. Their expensive tailored suits barely concealed the firearms beneath them. None of them stopped her. They had already learned she wasn't like the others. She wasn't interested in pleasing the Mafia Boss. She was interested in saving his daughter. Inside the medication room, rows of refrigerated medications sat neatly arranged behind reinforced glass. Everything was documented. Everything was barcoded. Everything was supposed to be impossible to tamper with. Olivia carefully removed Gianna's medication chart. The drug responsible for every oxygen crash was listed 3 times. Milrinone. A medication commonly used to help children with severe heart failure. She frowned. The dosage was correct. The prescription was correct. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. Her eyes drifted toward the medication bag itself. Crystal clear. No discoloration. No particles. No unusual odor. Exactly what she expected. Still, something bothered her. She held the .4 bag beneath the bright examination light. Nothing. She slowly rotated it. Again. Nothing. Just as she was about to place it back on the shelf, her thumb brushed across the plastic near the lower seal. She froze. There it was. A tiny rough spot. So small that most people would never notice it. She held the bag closer. Barely visible beneath the hospital label. A microscopic puncture. Her heartbeat quickened. No. She whispered. She grabbed another unused bag from the same shipment. No puncture? Another. Nothing. A 4th. Perfect. Only Gianna's medication carried the tiny sealed mark. Someone had pierced the bag after it left the manufacturer. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a manufacturing defect. Someone had accessed the medication. Someone inside the hospital. She quickly withdrew a sterile syringe. Without damaging the evidence, she collected a tiny sample of the remaining solution and sealed it inside a laboratory specimen tube. No accusations. No panic. Only evidence. Exactly as she'd been trained during her years as an army combat medic. Outside the pharmacy, footsteps echoed down the hallway. Olivia immediately slipped the specimen tube into her scrub pocket. The heavy door opened. Dr. Nathan Mercer stepped inside. The respected chief of pediatrics smiled politely. Burning the midnight oil again? Olivia forced herself to smile back. I wanted to double-check Gianna's medications. Mercer nodded approvingly. Good. Attention to detail saves lives. His words should have been reassuring. Instead, they unsettled her. Because he wasn't looking at her. He was looking directly at the medication shelf behind her? Almost. Checking something. You've been here a while. Mercer asked casually. About 20 minutes. He nodded once. Try to get some rest. We have another long day tomorrow. He walked away. Olivia waited until his footsteps disappeared. Only then did she allow herself to breathe. Something about that conversation felt wrong. Very wrong. She couldn't explain it. But instinct rarely asked for permission. It simply warned. She hurried downstairs to the hospital pathology laboratory. Fortunately, one technician remained on the overnight shift. Can you run an emergency chemical analysis? The technician glanced at the specimen. Official request? Olivia hesitated. No. I just need to know if anything unusual is inside. The technician sighed. You know protocol. I do. It's a child. The technician studied her face. Then quietly took the sample. Give me 20 minutes. Those 20 minutes felt longer than the entire night. Olivia paced the hallway. Every possible explanation raced through her mind. Maybe she was wrong. Maybe the puncture happened during shipping. Maybe the medication degraded naturally. Maybe. The laboratory door opened. The technician's expression had changed completely. You need to see this. He handed her the preliminary report. Olivia's eye scanned the page. Then stopped. Her stomach tightened. Mixed inside the medication was a powerful experimental beta-blocking compound. One never approved for pediatric use. In tiny doses. It wouldn't immediately kill a healthy child. But combined with milrinone, it could gradually suppress heart function. Each dose weakened the heart a little more, making the illness appear natural. Making doctors believe the child was simply getting worse. Olivia stared at the report in disbelief. Someone wasn't trying to treat Gianna. Someone was trying to make sure she never recovered. The technician lowered his voice. I've never seen this drug outside clinical research. Who has access to it? He hesitated. Very few people. Mostly senior physicians involved in pharmaceutical trials. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. That list was remarkably short. She folded the report carefully. This analysis never happened. The technician looked surprised. What? If the wrong person knows we're onto this, they'll destroy every piece of evidence. He slowly nodded. I understand. Olivia turned toward the elevator. Her mind raced. She needed proof. Real proof. Because accusing one of the country's most respected pediatric specialists without undeniable evidence would destroy her career. And possibly cost Gianna her life. As the elevator doors opened, she stepped inside. Just before they closed, a voice echoed down the hallway. "Olivia." She turned. It was Enzo Moretti, Matteo's head of security. His expression was unusually serious. "The boss wants to see you." Olivia's heart skipped. Had Matteo discovered what she was investigating? Or worse, had someone already told him she was asking questions? As the elevator doors slid shut behind them, neither realized they were being watched. From the far end of the corridor, behind the glass walls of his office, Dr. Nathan Mercer slowly lowered the blinds, then reached for his phone, and quietly said 4 words. "She knows too much." Enzo Moretti led Olivia through a private corridor normally reserved for hospital executives. 2 armed guards opened a reinforced security door. Inside, Matteo De Luca stood alone. His eyes never left Olivia. "You found something." It wasn't a question. Olivia slowly placed the laboratory report on the table between them. "I found enough to know your daughter isn't dying from a disease." Matteo looked up. For the first time since they had met, genuine hope flickered across his exhausted face. "What is it?" Olivia took a deep breath. "I can't tell you yet." The room became silent. Even the guard shifted uneasily. Matteo stepped closer. "My daughter is lying unconscious." "I know. And you're telling me you won't explain?" Olivia refused to lower her eyes. "I'm telling you that if I'm wrong, I destroy innocent people. If I'm right." She glanced toward Gianna's ICU room. "The person responsible will destroy every piece of evidence the moment they know we're suspicious." For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Then Matteo surprised everyone. "What do you need?" Olivia answered immediately. "Time. And your trust." Enzo looked shocked. Very few people spoke to Matteo De Luca that way. Fewer still walked away afterward. Matteo stared at her. "Finally. You have both." The plan began before sunrise. Nothing changed publicly. Doctors continued making rounds. Dr. Nathan Mercer confidently directed treatment. Hospital staff believed Gianna remained critically ill. Only 4 people knew the truth. Matteo, Olivia, Enzo, and the overnight laboratory technician. Olivia quietly replaced every medication scheduled for Gianna with a pharmacy-approved batch prepared under direct supervision. The altered medication bags were removed, but not destroyed. Instead, each one was sealed inside evidence containers. Every fingerprint, every puncture mark, every chemical sample, preserved. Now they needed one thing: the person responsible. At exactly 5:40 the following morning, Olivia stood outside Gianna's room pretending to update medical charts. From the corner of her eye, she saw him. Dr. Nathan Mercer. He glanced both ways before entering the medication room. Olivia remained perfectly still. Seconds later, Enzo whispered into the tiny radio hidden beneath his jacket. "He's inside." Security cameras had already been redirected. Not erased. Recorded. Every angle. Every movement. Mercer removed a syringe from his coat. He approached the replacement medication prepared for Gianna. Then, he pushed the needle through the 4 bag. Exactly where Olivia had predicted. Enzo's voice came through again. "We have him." But Olivia shook her head. "Not yet." Mercer carefully resealed the puncture with a transparent medical adhesive before placing the bag back on the shelf. He smiled to himself, then turned toward the door. The moment he stepped into the hallway, Matteo De Luca was waiting. The doctor froze. His confident smile disappeared instantly. Behind Matteo stood 6 armed bodyguards. Behind them, hospital security. And behind them, two detectives from the hospital's medical fraud task force. Nobody spoke. Mercer forced a nervous laugh. Mr. DeLuca. What an unexpected. Matteo interrupted him. Open the medication room. Mercer's face lost its color. I don't understand. I wasn't asking. One of the detectives unlocked the door. The evidence bags were already waiting. The laboratory technician stepped forward. So are the chemical reports. Mercer slowly backed away. This is ridiculous. The medication was contaminated before it arrived. Olivia finally spoke. No. She held up a digital tablet. The surveillance footage shows you contaminating it less than 60 seconds ago. Enzo pressed play. The hallway monitor displayed everything. Mercer entering alone. Removing the syringe. Injecting the medication. Resealing the puncture. Every second. Every movement. Every lie. The hallway became completely silent. Mercer looked toward the exit. Then toward Matteo. Then toward Olivia. He realized there was nowhere left to run. His shoulders collapsed. It wasn't supposed to be her. Everyone stared. The detectives immediately activated their body cameras. What do you mean? Mercer closed his eyes. I was hired. By who? He hesitated. Matteo didn't move. Didn't threaten him. Didn't reach for a weapon. He simply waited. Sometimes silence frightened people more than violence. Finally, Mercer whispered the name. Alessandro Vitoli. Enzo looked stunned. Matteo's expression hardened. Alessandro wasn't a rival boss. He was Matteo's financial advisor. The man who had managed the family's legitimate businesses for almost 15 years. The one person everyone trusted. Mercer continued. He said, if Gianna died, you'd lose the will to lead. He promised me $10 million. The detectives immediately placed Mercer under arrest. Within hours, search warrants were executed. Financial records were seized. Encrypted bank transfers connected Alessandro to offshore payments made to Mercer over the previous 6 months. The conspiracy unraveled faster than anyone expected. Not because Matteo demanded revenge. Because Olivia insisted on evidence. 48 hours later, Gianna opened her eyes. The first thing she saw was her father sitting beside her bed. His head rested against folded arms. He had fallen asleep holding her tiny hand. Daddy! Matteo looked up so quickly his chair nearly tipped over. Tears filled his eyes. Gianna! She smiled weakly. You look tired. For the first time in days. The feared Mafia Boss laughed. A quiet laugh. The kind only a little girl could bring from a man the world believed had no heart. Olivia watched from the doorway. Satisfied. She quietly turned to leave. Miss Bennett. She stopped. Matteo walked toward her. I spent my entire life believing power sold everything. He glanced back at Gianna. I was wrong. Olivia smiled. It wasn't power that saved her. No. Matteo nodded. It was someone who cared enough to ask one more question when everyone else had already accepted the answer. 3 months later, Gianna returned to the hospital carrying a box of hand-drawn thank you cards for every nurse on the pediatric floor. One drawing showed a little girl holding hands with a smiling nurse beneath a bright yellow sun. At the bottom, written in uneven 6-year-old handwriting, were the words, "Heroes don't always wear capes. Sometimes they wear scrubs." And perhaps that was the greatest lesson of all. Because titles, money, power, even fear, can open doors. But it is courage, compassion, and the willingness to question what everyone else accepts That truly saves lives. If you've made it all the way to the end of this incredible story, thank you so much for spending your time with us. Stories like this remind us that true courage isn't measured by power, wealth, or influence. Sometimes, it belongs to the one person who refuses to give up when everyone else has already lost hope. If Olivia's determination and Gianna's journey touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments. What would you have done if you were Olivia? Would you have risked your career, and possibly your life, too? Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more powerful, emotional Mafia Boss stories filled with suspense, justice, and unforgettable plot twists. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create more powerful, emotional Mafia Boss stories filled with suspense, justice, and unforgettable plot twists. And turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Until next time, stay safe, stay kind, and remember, the strongest people are not always the most powerful. Sometimes, they are simply the ones who refuse to stop searching for the truth. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.